Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The 1839 publication of Matthias Jakob Schleiden's contributions to phytogenesis represents a moment of profound and generative intellectual force in the history of biology. It stands as a document of immense ambition, seeking to elevate the science of botany from a descriptive catalogue of forms into a unified discipline grounded in a single, universal principle of development. This essay undertakes a rigorous evaluation of the internal claims, methodological frameworks, and specific arguments presented within the seminal work. The analysis will proceed through the logical stages of Schleiden's argument, from his foundational premise concerning the universality of the cell to his detailed, though ultimately specious, mechanism of cytogenesis, assessing the evidence he marshalled and the intellectual architecture he constructed. The purpose is to understand the work on its own terms, appreciating the cogency of its vision, while critically examining the empirical and logical underpinnings of its specific propositions, thereby illuminating its complex legacy as a catalyst for the modern cellular paradigm. Section 1. The call for a unifying developmental principle. Schleiden opens his contributions to phytogenesis with a powerful rhetorical and philosophical argument concerning the state of botanical science. He portrays the field as an accumulation of disparate facts, lacking a central, organizing concept that could transform it into a true science. His claim is that the study of the fully formed plant, its anatomy and morphology, yields incomplete knowledge. True understanding, he posits, resides in a study of origins in the process of phytogenesis itself. He proposes that the history of the development of the individual part is the key to understanding all of botany. This initial argument functions as a powerful justification for the subsequent investigation. It frames his own work as the necessary solution to a deep-seated disciplinary crisis. The evaluation of this claim reveals its strategic brilliance. Schleiden is establishing the criteria by which his own contribution should be judged, demanding that botany adopt a developmental and microscopic perspective. He champions a new kind of inquiry, one that moves from the elemental constituent outward to the complex organism. His argument is persuasive because it appeals to a desire for causal, mechanistic explanation, a hallmark of the physical sciences whose success he wished to emulate in biology. He id effect, defining the very nature of a valid botanical explanation, steering the entire discipline toward the question of generation at its most fundamental. Section 2. The universal agency of the cytoblast. Having established the need for a developmental principle, Schleiden proceeds to his first major empirical assertion: the universal presence and fundamental importance of the cell nucleus, which he terms the cytoblast. Building upon the 1831 observations of Robert Brown, who first described the nucleus as a common feature in plant cells, Schleiden performs a crucial conceptual leap. He elevates the cytoblast from a mere anatomical component to the central and indispensable agent of cell formation. He presents a series of observations across a wide range of plant tissues, from the phanerogams to the cryptogams, to substantiate his claim of its ubiquity. His methodology here consists of systematic microscopic examination, and his argument is one of induction. By demonstrating the cytoblast's presence in cell after cell, tissue after tissue, he constructs a case for its universal and therefore primary role. The critical evaluation of this section must acknowledge its foundational success. Schleiden correctly identified the nucleus as a constant and essential feature of the living plant cell. His insistence on its universality was a powerful unifying observation. Where his argument begins to diverge from later understanding is in the function he assigns to it. He conceives of the cytoblast as the cell former, the physical mould around which a new cell precipitates. This interpretation, while empirically grounded in the constant concurrence of nucleus and cell, imputes a specific causal mechanism that his observations alone could support but could never definitively prove. The strength of this section is its empirical, breadth its speculative character lies in the functional role it confidently assigned to the observed structure. Section 3 The detailed mechanism of free cell formation, the heart of Schleiden's 1839 paper, and the locus of its most significant error, is his detailed account of the mechanism of cytogenesis. He proposes a theory of free cell formation, a process of spontaneous generation of new cells from a non-cellular, nutritive fluid he calls the cytoplasma. This section of his work is remarkable for its specificity and its procedural, almost recipe-like, description. The process begins, he claims, with the appearance of minute, dark granules within the amorphous cytoplasma, often located inside a parent cell. These granules coalesce to form a larger, more defined body, the nucleolus. Around this primordial nucleolus, the cytoblast, or nucleus, then precipitates, forming a distinct sphere. Schleiden's description becomes even more vivid at the next stage. He posits that a fine, transparent vesicle, the new cell wall, then appears upon the surface of the cytoblast. This vesicle expands almost like a bubble being blown, growing outward into the surrounding cytoplasma. As it enlarges, it detaches from the cytoblast, which remains embedded within the thickness of the young cell's wall or is positioned against its inner surface. In this model, the cytoblast acts as a kind of nucleation site, initiating and guiding the formation of an entirely new cell from a formless organic soup. An evaluation of this central claim reveals a fascinating intersection of meticulous observation and profound misinterpretation. Schleiden's descriptions of nucleoli and nuclei were accurate. His error was one of temporal process. He interpreted static microscopic images showing nuclei and young cells of various sizes as sequential stages in a single generative process. The model he constructed, bearing a striking resemblance to processes of crystallization from a solution, was a highly creative and intellectually satisfying explanation. It offered a clear, step-by-step mechanism for the appearance of life's fundamental unit. The evidence he provided consisted of these static images, arranged into a logical, developmental sequence that fit his preconceived theory. The weakness of his methodology was its failure to incorporate direct observation of the process over time. Contemporaries like Hugo von Moll, through more patient observation of living algae, would soon describe a completely different phenomenon, the division of a pre-existing cell into two daughter cells. Schleiden's theory of de novo formation, while elegant, posited a mechanism that subsequent live cell imaging would definitively supersede. His framework were compelling fiction, an attempt to impose a known physical analogy, that of precipitation, onto a biological process, and was a first try and explain systematic. Section 4 The cellular basis of plant tissues. Following his exposition of the generative mechanism, Schleiden applies his cellular principle to explain the formation of complex plant tissues. This section of the contributions showcases the immense explanatory power of his central idea, even with its flawed generative core. He argues that all the diverse and specialized structures within plant epidermal cells, parenchyma, woody fibers, and the intricate spiral and pitted vessels of the vascular system are nothing more than modified cells. He describes how the primary cellular vesicle, formed according to his cytoblast theory, undergoes a series of transformations. It can remain a simple polyhedron, packed together with others to form parenchyma. It can elongate to become a fiber. In the case of vascular vessels, he proposes that a series of cells arrange themselves intoned, and their adjoining walls dissolve to form a continuous tube. The characteristic thickenings, such as the spiral bands with intricades, explains the secondary deposits laid down on the inner surface of the primary cell. The evaluation of these claims must separate the specific mechanism from the general principle. While his account of each cell's origin was incorrect, his conception of tissues as populations of modified cells was revolutionary. This section provided a unified theory of plant histology. It reduced the bewildering variety of plant structures to a set of variations on a single, fundamental theme the cell. His line of reasoning was powerful because it created a clear, hierarchical model of plant organization, moving from cytoblast to cell, from cell to tissue, and from tissue to organ. His methodology here is comparative and descriptive, tracing the cellular nature of diverse anatomical features. The success of this section lay in its ability to bring order and intellectual coherence to the field of plant anatomy. It provided botanists with a new way to see the plant, not as an assemblage of fundamentally different kinds of matter, but as a commonwealth of cells, each with a shared origin and a specialized destiny. This part of his work endured long after his theory of cytogenesis was discarded, forming the true foundation of cellular phytotomy. Section 5 Methodological polemics and the assertion of authority. Throughout the contributions to phytogenesis, Schleiden employs a distinctively acerbic and polemical tone. He frequently dismisses the work of his predecessors and contemporaries, casting them as collectors of trivial facts who lacked a proper scientific, philosophical approach. This rhetorical stance is itself a central claim of the work, that his method is the only valid path to botanical truth. He champions a combination of meticulous microscopic observation with bold theoretical induction. He argues that science progresses through the formulation of broad, unifying laws, and he presents his own work as the premier example of this method in botany. This claim to methodological superiority is deeply intertwined with the substance of his scientific arguments. He uses it to create an environment in which his own theory appears as the only logical and rigorous option available. An analysis of this aspect of the paper reveals a figure of immense self-confidence and intellectual combativeness. Schleiden sought to remake the entire discipline in his own image. There is a profound irony, of course, in his position. He champions empirical rigor, while advancing a central hypothesis based on a flawed interpretation of his empirical evidence. His dismissal of others' work creates a sense of intellectual isolation, positioning him as a solitary genius. This adversarial approach had a significant impact on the reception of his work. It generated both intense support and fierce opposition. The evaluation of his polemical claims shows that they were instrumental in drawing sharp attention to his theories. While his tone could be perceived as arrogant, it also conveyed an undeniable passion and a conviction in the importance of the cellular perspective. He was not merely presenting findings, he was fighting for a new paradigm, and his combative style was one of his primary weapons in that intellectual struggle. The very forcefulness of his assertions compelled other researchers to engage with his claims to test them, and ultimately, in the case of cytogenesis, to correct them. Conclusion: the 839 contributions of Phytogenesis by Matthias Jakob Schleiden is a work of monumental and complicated significance. A direct evaluation of its internal claims reveals a dual legacy. The work's overarching propositions that the cell is the universal elementary unit of all plants, and that the entire science of botany must be refounded upon the developmental, or genetic, principle are profoundly correct and transformative. These ideas provided the essential framework for a modern, unified botanical science. Schleiden's arguments for the cellular basis of all plant tissues, demonstrating how complex structures arise from modifications of a single type of constituent, brought a revolutionary coherence to plant anatomy. However, the specific mechanism that he proposed as the engine of this entire system, the theory of free cell formation from a cytoblast, was a brilliant and detailed fiction. His step-by-step model of cytogenesis, though based on careful observation, was a product of misinterpretation, an attempt to fit biological phenomena into an accessible, non-biological analogy of chemical precipitation. The paper's enduring impact, therefore, stems less from the accuracy of its central answer and more from the power of its central question. By forcing the issue of cytogenesis to the forefront of biological inquiry, and by establishing the cell as the undeniable protagonist of life's drama, Schleiden's fiercely argued, authoritatively presented, and fundamentally flawed masterpiece catalyzed the very investigations that would build upon his correct premises while dismantling his erroneous conclusions, securing his place as a primary, if imperfect, architect of the cell theory.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.